In today's video, you're going to get an unfiltered glimpse at what the typical day looks like as an algorithmic trader. By running an algorithmic portfolio, the responsibility of daily trade decisions is taken away from us. This helps with the emotional and psychological aspect of trading that a lot of people are subject to. However, there's much more to it when it comes to the operational workflow we experience on a day-to-day basis. Trading futures involves substantial risk of loss and is not appropriate for all investors. So today's video is going to be a quick snapshot inside of the algorithmic trading workflow, or my typical day as an algorithmic trader. It's a start to finish look at the daily workflow behind a fully automated futures portfolio, OBC Core. From doing pre-market checks to the next day strategy research, this video will show you what my day looks like in a chronological basis. Something important to note is that this portfolio consists of intraday strategies and trades the futures market. So this is not active trading, it's supervised data. I go through 6 different checkpoints, 1 closed loop, and I experience 0 discretionary trades throughout the entire day. One of the most important aspects of algorithmic trading is making sure that your strategies are working properly while avoiding any sort of manual or discretionary trading on top of it. This includes exiting positions early, adding contracts on top of your different trades, or enabling and disabling certain strategies based off of a short-term and intraday sentiment. These algorithmic strategies are not based upon today's feeling, it's based upon months and months of research and testing that got us to where we are today. So it's important to not get emotional in a drawdown, and it's important to not fight the data that you already know works and has had an edge in the past. So most of the day isn't trading. 55% of my time I spend doing strategy research and testing. This is where I'm doing Python backtests, parameter sweeps, walk forward tests, stress testing, etc. Around 20% of my time spent throughout the day is education and studying. This is where I'm reading research, learning about market microstructure, reading different books, watching videos, and essentially trying to develop different strategies mentally, and essentially trying to create a thesis for different strategies that I'd want to test later in the day. 12% is live monitoring, so it's just passive supervision, watching the log and not necessarily the chart. And I want to emphasize that this is passive. This is really just me glancing over at my other monitor, making sure that the systems are running properly. 8% is reconciliation and reporting. So at the end of the day, we'll do a live versus backtest match, and we'll track our performance accordingly. And last but not least, the smallest amount of time I spend is the pre-market setup. This is where I'm checking the virtual private server, or VPS, making sure that NinjaTrader, our current trading platform that we use, is started up and working properly, as well as a list of other things. Here are the 6 checkpoints of the day from open to close and also after hours. This is all going to be in Eastern time. At 8:45, I do my pre-market check. At 9, that is the earliest time where my automated strategies will enter the market. So I want to make sure that everything is running properly before that. From 9 to 3:55 is hands off. It's just monitoring and making sure that the strategies are working accordingly. From 3:55 to 4 p.m., I'm making sure that the account is flat and all positions are exited. At 4 p.m. is where I check my live performance compared to the backtest of that exact day. And from 4 p.m. on is where I do my research and deployment. A lot of the time, I don't like to do a lot of backtesting on my VPS because it causes a lot of CPU load and can stress the trading platform and possibly mess up different strategies that should be working. While that's a rare occurrence, it just fits well with the schedule to do strategy research and testing in the after hours. So 8:45 in the morning, pre-market checkpoint. This is where we confirm every system is online before the first fill. So this is a 15-minute window where I make sure the VPS is responsive. I use chart VPS, but I confirm the uptime, the network is connected, and that the session didn't drop overnight. On the right over here, you can actually see a exact screenshot of what I look at. The chart is there, but only for reference. I use it just to see where the strategies are entering and exiting, and I try my best not to stare at it too much or watch P&L, and I try not to apply any form of intraday bias that I may have from technical indicators, etc. The second step is where I make sure NinjaTrader 8 is launched, the workspace is open, market data connection is live, and the account connection is ready. The third step is making sure that all strategies are loaded. In this screenshot, we have micro crude oil, we have micro ES, micro NASDAQ, and the micro Russell 2000. It's important to also check that it's the correct version of the strategy, the correct instrument, and the correct contract month. This is really important because, especially for micro crude oil, the contract rollover is monthly, and it's important to make sure that, if I'm not mistaken, from the 13th to the 15th of every month, that the contract date is updated properly. I also want to make sure the data series or interval that the strategy is applied on is correct, as well as a few other factors. And last but not least, I make sure that the NinjaScript output or log is open. That's this bottom window right here. This shows the internal functions of the algorithmic orders that are being placed throughout the day. It's important to monitor because this is where you can start to see problems arising, and it's also a way to see if your algorithmic strategies are working according to plan. So this is a view of the VPS server that I have access to on different computers or even my phone. This is the chart window. Here's the main command center window where it holds the strategies. Here you can view your positions, executions, log, etc. And then at the bottom, here's the output. Something I had to learn about the hard way was disabling and re-enabling my strategies every day. So during the 8:45 checkpoint, I actually toggle my strategies off and then back on. This forces NinjaScript to rebind the state against the current tick stream. It sounds confusing, but essentially there's a lot of stale data from overnight. I've even seen if I keep a strategy enabled for more than a few days, there are times where it just will skip an entry entirely. So this essentially resyncs the strategy with the current market data and makes sure it performs properly throughout the day. 9 a.m. This is the earliest time that my algorithmic portfolio will place a trade, so it's essential to make sure I get all those checks in before this time. Here's a brief showcase of what it looks like when I'm enabling these strategies as well. The output will show submit order unmanaged with the timestamp to the bar, and this shows that these algorithmic strategies are enabled and working properly. 9 a.m. to 3:55 p.m. This is the passive monitoring session. It's essentially 7 hours of doing nothing on purpose. So I don't watch the charts, I just watch the log and the output. I'll really only use the chart because it's an easier way to interpret and visualize the position. However, if you're someone that struggles watching a trade, I would heavily advise to not even watch the chart at all and only keep the positions tab open. Watching the charts can cause you to second guess the strategy and the trade at hand, and it's really easy to forget that the strategy you deployed was intentionally deployed. There was work done to get it to this stage. However, in the moment, it's hard to acknowledge sometimes, and you really want to exit a position or even add to it if you like what you see. And that's never what you want to do. So throughout this process, I'm just making sure the data feed stays alive and everything's connected. A dropped feed mid-session is the single highest impact failure mode. I've actually had a couple times where my NinjaTrader will disconnect or my virtual private server will crash. When this happens, the strategy will actually disable, but the position will be held. If this does happen, I make sure to monitor the trade appropriately. I'll re-enable the strategy so it enters in a virtual position, and I'll watch and wait for that virtual position to close. And when I get that notification, then I'll manually exit the position on NinjaTrader. Number 2, I'll make sure the orders are routing properly. Number 3, it's important to make sure that the output stays clean. There's no red messages or errors popping up throughout the day. And number 4, I make sure that slippage stays in budget. When I see an entry, I'll check the output to see what the intended fill was and what the actual order fill was. While slippage is usually never severe, it's important to note for the 4 p.m. checkpoint where I compare the live performance versus the backtested performance of the day. So 3:55 to 4 p.m., this is where I'm making sure the account is flat. Every strategy that I trade right now is intraday, so nothing gets carried overnight. Here's a screenshot on the right of what I'd be looking at. I'd be monitoring the positions tab to make sure that there are no open positions, and then the output will also run a cancel all orders command at 3:59 p.m. in 31 seconds. This is a really quick check, however, it's very, very crucial and important. If you're not paying attention, you can hold a position a lot longer than you wanted, which is a huge liability. As well as if you're trading through a proprietary trading firm, that can actually violate your account if you don't close out within the intended time. So I make sure the positions table is empty. Number 2, make sure there's no working orders or anything that will be placed overnight. And 3, I make sure the cancel all orders command actually fires in the output. So for the 5th checkpoint, this is at 4 p.m. After I'd made sure that the account is flat and we're not liable for any positions, I'll compare our live performance to the back-tested performance of that same day. So on top, you see our trade performance. This is our live performance with real commission, real clearing fees, and exchange fees. And on the bottom, this is our strategy performance or a backtest that was ran on the day. Here's a brief example of one of our micro S&P 500 strategies. As you can see on the bottom, its entry price was 75.16.25. It entered at 9:47 in the morning and exited at 2:56 p.m. When you compare it to live performance, the entry price was actually 75.15.75, meaning there was 2 ticks of slippage there. The exit price was 75.25.5 with another 2 ticks. And according to live performance, the entry time was actually a minute earlier, as well as the exit time. This shows the slight difference between backtesting and live performance and how important it is to model slippage and commission into all your backtests no matter what. Another thing I pay attention to is the profit. So as you can see on the bottom screenshot, the 2 strategies individually made $48.75 and then $97.50, but in live performance, they actually made $46.85 and $103.70. So in live performance, one of the trades actually performed worse given commission and slippage, and the other one actually performed better because it got a lower entry price on the long. Now, slight differences in these 2 data sets is completely fine and totally expected. That's what we model for. However, if I see that a strategy went short when in live performance it went long, or the entry price and exit prices are entirely different, as well as the entry and exit times, that's a major red flag. I will proceed to disable that strategy and troubleshoot what's going on either within the platform or the code. So where most of my time is spent is actually in the after hours. The trading day is just supervision. The after hours is where the real edge is built. So after the session closes, the second day begins. This is where I'm utilizing Python through AI-assisted workflows, doing stress tests, etc. This is the pipeline that decides what gets to fire tomorrow at 9 in the morning. Step 1, I have an idea, thesis first. Then I'll proceed to backtest it on the Python engine. If that works properly, I'll actually translate the code into NinjaScript and test it on the NinjaTrader 8 platform to make sure it's actually deployable. If it passes that test, then I'll proceed to stress test it, do a walk forward analysis, and then eventually validate it in a simulated account on NinjaTrader. Only after that entire process is when I get to decide whether or not the strategy is worth deploying. I'd say less than to roughly 1% of all strategies actually make it this far. Algorithmic trading is systematic, it's supervised, it's repeatable, and it's an everyday process. I hope you were able to find a little bit of insight into algorithmic trading if you were curious on what the process looks like. It's really useful for someone who's been trading for a while and knows how to read market sentiment or technical indicators, but just doesn't have the time or the schedule to sit in front of a chart from 9:30 in the morning to market close at 4 p.m. I find it really useful because I can do my strategy research and testing at midnight, for example, and then proceed to enable the strategy at 8:45 in the morning and not need to be constantly watching the chart from then on. It's definitely something worth exploring if you enjoy trading but work a 9-to-5 job that doesn't allow you to trade throughout the day, or if you're just curious on possibly building another stream of income. And a big disclaimer, that income does not come quick. It's a pretty tedious process, but in the end, if done properly, it can become a very valuable asset. If this video has made you think a little bit more about algorithmic trading, I encourage you to visit oldbainbridgecapital.com. Go to our Learn section and enter in your first and last name as well as your email. We're working on an education program where we teach you how to build your own algorithmic trading portfolio. It'll cover strategy discovery, thesis, Python research workflow, and keep in mind you do not need to know how to code whatsoever. We utilize AI-assisted workflows and prompts to turn a plain English strategy into a working, coded, automated strategy. We also teach NinjaTrader 8 deployment, VPS deployment, portfolio construction, and much more than just these 4 bullet points. Once again, this program's coming soon, so just put your information in and you'll be updated on when it comes out as well as the pricing for it. If that's not your speed but you still want to trade with evidence, you can also visit the website for backtesting, optimization, and stress testing reports for your own individual strategy. With all that being said, I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like to see more algorithmic trading content in the future, feel free to comment that below. If you'd like us to stick to more backtesting and individual strategy research, also comment that below. We also just launched our LinkedIn page, so visit that. It'll be Old Bainbridge Capital on LinkedIn. There we'll post further insight on our automated portfolio that we currently operate, as well as other reports that aren't included on YouTube. Thanks again for supporting Old Bainbridge Capital, and we'll be back shortly with another video.